Jasmine, Ariel, David, and I were all lovers of scary stuff, and we were craving a new and thrilling adventure. We had gone on ghost tours, we had visited cemeteries late at night, but we had never really experienced anything truly paranormal or scary. So this time we decided to rent a cabin in the deep woods in the Appalachian Mountains for a week to actually try to experience something creepy, you can say. Something about putting yourself in a situation like that really seems to get your adrenaline going. You know that feeling? That same feeling that makes you want to drive through an isolated back road at night, hoping you don't get a flat tire, but at the same time hoping something does happen so you can get that experience from a scary movie. Or is this just me? Anyways, we couldn't leave my husky dog Lucy behind, so she joined us as well. The cabin that we had rented was completely isolated from everybody. Here, there was no connection to anybody, the absence of the internet, and the reach of Wi-Fi only inside the house made us enjoy everything much more. The cabin itself was really nice and towered with the trees that seemed to stretch into the sky, with its wooden exterior and with a stone chimney rising on one side. Inside, the warm glow of the cabin's lights covered us, casting a small glow into the wooden floors. Old pictures and artwork were all around the walls. The cabin featured expansive, floor-to-ceiling windows and glass sliding doors that opened into the balcony into the backyard. These impressive glass panels were designed to connect between the cabin's interior and the natural beauty of the surrounding forest. During the day, they flooded the living space with natural light, and at night, they transformed the cabin into a cozy place where one could still appreciate the serene beauty of the outdoors while staying safe and comfortable inside. This way, even if you were inside the cabin, it still almost felt like you were outside. Anyways, the first day after a long day of hiking and exploring the trails, we returned to the cabin and I decided to settle down with a bath before enjoying some peaceful time on the balcony. As the sun began to set, I stepped out into the big 2-story balcony with my dog Lucy and iced coffee and my phone to put on some scary stories to enjoy the view, and last, with some weed. Because, let's face it, a vacation isn't complete with a little relaxation, right? The balcony extended from the cabin's rear, making us feel as though we were high above the ground, offering a clear view of the big landscape. There was a staircase on the side of the balcony that would lead down to the bottom, which Lucy quickly descended to go play in the field. The huge balcony was almost like 30 by 30 feet, perfect for gatherings and hangouts at night. Speaking of the landscape, it was incredibly spacious, and you could easily distinguish the property line where the land gave way to dense tall trees. From this point, I could take in the panoramic view from the field where Lucy was, chasing squirrels and enjoying the spacious freedom. It's hard to describe, but it was a breathtaking view, a serene moment. However, my smoky getaway session was cut short. Just as I settled down with my iced coffee and was getting ready to roll some papers, Lucy began barking towards the woods. Her barks echoed through the trees, sending shivers down my spine. I quickly got up to investigate, but I couldn't see Lucy anywhere, nor did the depths of the woods reveal anything. I called and practically yelled for Lucy to return, since at this point I could hear the echoes of her barks. But she continued barking before I eventually saw her come out the woods and run back towards the field, up the stairs, and get behind me almost like something had scared her. But this was weird. Lucy, who almost never showed fear of anything, had me baffled. I glanced back over the balcony, trying to see what might have scared her, but there was nothing there. I decided to head back inside with Lucy. I slid the door open, having her to hurry inside. As I entered, I saw Jasmine, Ariel, and David, who were all watching a scary movie in the living room. Jasmine quickly asked, "Back so soon?" They were aware of my little ritual, if you could call it that. Whatever you like, but this was my way of relaxing, and also managing my anxiety. Besides, there was something relaxing about combining a smoke session with some scary stories. Speaking of a ritual, they had put on a movie called The Ritual, which I had already seen. However, I asked if I could join them for a rewatch. I mean, it's not like they were going to say no. Anyways, my dog Lucy quickly went to go lay down on the floor, where everyone was at, and I sat alongside everyone else. I quickly forgot about what had possibly scared Lucy, but I guess it was because there was something about being out in the darkness that seemed to play tricks on my mind. Maybe too many horror movies had left their mark. Regardless, as the night continued, we all eventually fell asleep in the living room. On the second day of our trip, we collectively agreed to try to embrace the solitude and stay in. It was a day dedicated to showing our cooking and grilling skills. As everyone took turns in the kitchen, the smell of sizzling barbecue filled the air as laughing and friendly competition started. We dug out our collection of board games, cards, and puzzles. The purpose was clear. We aimed to disconnect from social media as much as possible, cherishing the simple moments of each other's company and engaging in each other's conversations. To be honest, it turned out to be a challenge. I think the fucks of life and all this shit in today's world makes us forget about true connections and relationships. But this was most especially challenging for Jasmine, battling the temptation to post on her various social media accounts, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, which is now known as X. She fidgeted with her phone, her fingers itching to scroll through her social media feed. Sitting nearby, I chuckled and said, "Jas, you've been looking at that phone for hours. You're not missing much out there in the digital world." Jasmine sighed, torn between her phone and the challenge to stay disconnected. "I know, but it's just so difficult. I want to share our cabin adventures with all my followers," she said. I smirked. I came ready for this. And feel free to steal my idea if you ever take a trip and need to disconnect. So I offer her a solution. How about we capture these moments the old-fashioned way? With a Polaroid camera, we can create physical memories to look back on. That will be the fun part too, that we actually won't know how the pictures are gonna look. The eyes of Jasmine opened up. You know what? That sounds kind of fun. Let's do it. And with that, she set her phone aside, embracing the charm of capturing memories in an old traditional way. Once we had wrapped up our day of cooking, games, and quality time, I decided to freshen up with a shower, getting ready for my nightly ritual on the balcony. However, convincing Lucy to join me outdoors with a little encouragement, she finally gave in, and together we ventured into the balcony. The view remained as breathtaking as ever, casting a soothing view, almost a welcoming aroma, over me. Despite the serene setting, a lingering unease still tugged at my senses from the previous day, but I brushed it off and I settled down, placing my container of God's green leafy substance on one side and my iced coffee on the other. With my phone in hand, I went through my collection of downloaded YouTube videos, all of them about scary stories. As I lost myself in the stories, my imagination painted the eerie scenes in my head. Lucy, once again, was playing around in the yard. I could hear her running back and forth, her energetic running drawing my attention. But then I heard that she ran towards the side of the cabin, possibly going to the front. As I immersed myself in the stories on my phone and started to enjoy my nightly ritual, a doubt began at the back of my mind. It was a sensation that I couldn't shake. One that triggered thoughts of a book I had read once, The Gift of Fear. The book talked about countless stories of people who had experienced this creepy feeling, acting in ways they normally wouldn't. According to the author, it's a survival instinct buried deep within our brains, capable of sensing even the smallest hints of danger, often without our rational minds being aware. It's a testament to show how our brain is so smart. So in that moment, I decided to pause my phone, allowing the abrupt silence to engulf the surroundings. The world outside seemed to be quiet. There was no sound from the woods, no nightly critters, nothing, just pure silence. I know you might be thinking that I'm possibly just high, But no, the sensation was different. It wasn't the blissful cloud nine feeling anymore. Something felt off. And it was one of those situations where a minor, small detail could be more scarier than outright horror. I swiftly grabbed my iced coffee, and almost forgetting my precious weed, rushed back inside, leaving behind the quietness of the night. As I opened the door, my friends turned their attention towards me, curiosity on their faces. I must have worn a startled expression because Jasmine was the first to ask, "Hey, are you okay? You look like you seen a ghost." I hesitated for a moment, then replied, "You know that feeling when something just doesn't sit right? Like something's off, even though you can't put your finger on it?" I asked, but they just looked at me, weird. Anyways, that was enough for me and I decided to call it a night. Later that night, I woke up having to use the restroom. As I stumbled towards the living room to get to the bathroom, strange noises on the other side of the glass windows and door caught my attention. My heart raced as I saw a dark silhouette, standing upright on two legs. I felt my heart drop. I had seen too many fucking scary movies to even think of the possibilities of what was out there. I froze, and the dark figure started moving desperately as if trying to come inside. For a second I thought I was dreaming, and so I closed my eyes hoping I would wake up. But when I opened them, the thing was still there. "Fuck this," I said. I ran and reached for the light switch to light up the outside. And that's when I saw Lucy. Holy shit, I couldn't believe I had forgotten all about her. I quickly opened the door to let Lucy back inside, grateful that it was just her this whole time. On the third day, I was ready to leave, to be honest. I don't know what it was, but I just felt like we weren't supposed to be here. And this was proven on this third night. My friend Jasmine decided to join me on the balcony. I didn't bring Lucy outside as she forcefully didn't even want to. So Jas decided to join me. We sat in silence, admiring the beauty of the field that was lit up by the moon before us. It was a good moment, enjoying our iced coffee, and once Jasmine finished hers, she decided to go back inside. As I started pulling out the weed, she looked back and said, "Well, how long are you going to be out here for? It's getting pretty late." I thought about it. Something about smoking weed helped me calm down and forget the way I was feeling. So I shrugged my shoulders and said, "It all depends." I laughed and she said, "Well, don't stay." She stopped in her words and looked towards the field down. I looked at her and said, "I won't be out here too long." "What is that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "What is what?" I said. She didn't say anything, so I decided to stand up and see what she was looking at. I followed her gaze and that's when I saw it. A bizarre figure standing in the field. It was a naked woman, her pale body stark against the dark landscape. We couldn't make out her features, but the sight sent a shiver down my spine. Her pale, naked body was moving in a slow, eerie, and disturbing manner towards us, and she was taking steps slowly. The moon was lighting up parts of her face, and I could see her jaw was hanging low, giving her a grotesque and unnatural appearance. Then, almost as if she noticed that we had seen her, she let out a wheezing sound, almost like a whisper escaping her throat. That's when she started to run towards us. Her head was tilted sideways, giving her an even more unsettling look. Her movements were stiff, as if her body was not fully under her control. It was a horrifying sight. As we stared in shock at this woman running towards us, frozen in fear, her appearance became more scary, as her pale naked body contorted in ways that defied all logic. Suddenly, she lost her balance and fell to the ground. I'm not sure who or what we were staring at this point. It was as if we had become paralyzed by fear, as we could only continue to watch her. Then, her movements started to grow more erratic. She began crawling on all fours, her hands and knees scraping against the ground. It was a fucking disturbing sight. Then she suddenly got back up, her hair hanging in tangled locks around her face. As she entered the light of the balcony underneath us, we saw that she had no eyes. Instead, where her eyes should have been, there were just empty black sockets. It was a horrifying sight as she continued to approach us with her head tilted sideways and her slack jaw. But what truly horrified us and snapped us back to retreat inside the cabin was when she fucking started to ascend the stairs that led up to the balcony with distorted movements. What made the sight even more scary was that it appeared as if she was looking up at us, despite her lack of eyes. Her head was still sideways, and her slack jaw remained open. We rushed back inside and found the others in the living room. Jasmine and I screamed at them, telling them that someone was outside looking like something out of The Exorcist. They stared at us in disbelief. Jasmine then said, "We're not fucking around, we both saw it." David and Ariel decided to investigate. And David said, "If you're pulling a prank, both of y'all sleeping outside tonight." We all looked towards the outside balcony, but there was no sign of anyone. David slid the door open, scanned the area, and said, "There's nobody out here." Reluctantly, we all stepped outside, and I said, "I'm not fucking kidding. There was someone or something out here." Jasmine chimed in, "Yeah, we both saw her." David then remarked, "Well, I guess she's gone now. Must be some psycho living out here in the woods, huh?" Even though they didn't believe us, that's when we all heard it. That same wheezing sound. David immediately said, "What the fuck is that?" We realized the noise was coming from right beside us, and we looked towards the staircase, which was at the end of the balcony on the side, and that's when I saw a dark silhouette, crouched in the corner. "There she fucking is," Jasmine said. "Fuck this, I'm out of here," I said as Jasmine quickly opened the door. That's when I saw that this woman started crawling on all fours with an unnatural jerky motion. Her limbs seemed to be dislocated, and her body contorted as she moved towards us. David, with panic in his voice, screamed at us to hurry the fuck up, as he was the one behind all of us, and we rushed to get inside the cabin. The wheezing sound from the woman grew louder, and even more scary as she closed the distance between us. David, being the last one, slid the door shut and locked the door, looked towards the glass, but she was no longer there. That's when Lucy started barking towards the windows too. "Alright, what the fuck was that?" David said. Jasmine and Ariel started crying, saying that they no longer wanted to be here. I mean, I agree with them. We decided to call search and rescue as we figured that was the only solution here. They advised us to stay put and not move, and to make sure that everything is locked, including all windows and doors. However, they did tell us it would take about a couple of hours for someone to get there. Those hours took basically all night, because we all ended up together in the living room, huddled together, with kitchen knives in hand, in case we needed to do what we had to do to survive. But the worst part was that wheezing sound, that awful, dreadful sound that she had been making, continued to echo throughout the cabin, with noises that also sounded like her running around the exterior of the cabin. And at one point, it even sounded like she was running on the roof of the cabin. Eventually, the noises stopped when the sun began to rise, and we could see the light coming through the big glass windows that led to the balcony. Then, we heard knocking at the front door. I went to go inspect, and it was a park ranger. We tried explaining everything, but of course, he didn't believe us. He did look around the cabin in every corner, and even went down to the backyard to look, but he didn't see any signs of anything. I know the report that he probably wrote up, that a bunch of assholes decided to get drunk and one of them pulled a prank. But I kid you not, this actually happened. And lesson learned, I will never go to a remote cabin ever again. I figure I would share this with you all, since it seems like everyone here enjoys knowing some paranormal experiences. But I'm not sure what this was. Maybe it was some psycho fuck just wanting to scare people. But who would actually in their right minds be enjoying doing this in the middle of nowhere? On top of that, the way she was moving is impossible for any normal human to move. Anyways, I don't know, but sometimes when I lay down at night in bed, I swear I can hear noises coming from the roof with that same wheezing sound. The following story will be told from a female perspective. My husband and I always wanted our son to be adventurous. We wanted to watch him grow up asking questions about everything, seeking out answers, and looking for adventure. It seems like whenever parents have a deep desire for how they want their children to be, somehow their children end up knowing and go the complete opposite direction. As Sam grew up, he became very introverted and would actively ask when it was time for bed. He loved to sleep, and our doctor gave a lot of explanations. All the illnesses had been checked and crossed out before he said, "I think he just likes to escape. He likes his dreams more than he enjoys life." This was at the age of 8. This actually depressed us as parents. What could be so wrong, so uninteresting about his life that he would come home and just sleep? The doctor recommended that we plan family activities that were geared towards him, as a way to engage him in life, give him something to be excited about after school. So for our very first trip, we decided we would go on a hike. The mountains were about an hour away, and we considered this a mild introduction to our new family habit. When we told Sam where we were going, he was excited. We knew then that hiking had been the right activity. On Saturday, we threw together some backpacks, lunch, water, and even a magnifying glass so Sam could inspect everything closely. He was so excited the entire way there. We were all thrilled. When we parked at the trailhead, Sam leaped out of the car and almost ran up the trail without us. I had to call him back so we could keep an eye on him. The hike was short, maybe half a mile, but Sam was trying to run it like a marathon. We kept calling for him to come back and check out this bird, or this butterfly, or a log that looked like Grandpa's face. He would come and look to humor us, but then would run ahead again. Eventually, we gave up trying to point things out and let him just run through the woods. We were pleased that he had taken so well to the trip. For once, Charlie and I felt like we knew what we were doing as parents. And for anyone who's a parent, knows exactly how that feels. We got to the end of the trail and ate our lunch. We were at a ledge along the mountain that was more like a hill. The sun was high overhead, and we could see over the trees for miles. Sam quickly drowned his lunch and we let him run off into the trees. "Don't go too far," I warned him. From the rock where we sat, I was looking at Sam while Charlie went to the bathroom. I saw Sam pick up some sticks, swing them at bushes and tree trunks until the stick broke, then picked up another one. He picked one up that was too short to be swung, but he smiled at it and ran around with it in front of him, using both hands. Finally, he ran over to me and said, "Mom, feel this stick. It feels so cool." "Does it now?" I grinned, taking the stick from him. It was in the shape of a Y, and when I grabbed one of the sides of the Y, it was perfectly smooth. It looked like someone had taken a knife, and from a bigger branch, shaped it into a slingshot stick. The two sides of the Y were curved, almost like handlebars from a bicycle. "Wow, that's really cool," I said to encourage him. He looked at me funny, then ran back into the woods to keep playing. We packed up lunch, stuffed everything back in the backpacks, and announced that we were ready to hike back. Sam came back without complaining, and we began walking down the trail. Instead of running ahead, Sam started to lag behind, still clutching the Y stick. He held it in front of him with both hands as before, and was swinging it around slowly, almost like if it was a magnifying glass and he were searching for something. "Come on, Sam," Charlie started saying when he stood in one place for too long. We both had to stop because he had fallen so far behind. He was pointing his stick into the trees, with his arms stretching out. He kept looking from the stick to the trees, as if he was trying to line something up. We both waited patiently for a few seconds, but the heat was getting to us and we were ready for an air-conditioned car. "Sam, let's go," I called. "Okay," he called back, but he didn't move. Charlie walked back to him. He put his hands on both of Sam's shoulders and guided him down the trail. The whole time, Sam kept both hands firmly on the stick and tried his best to point it back towards the trees where he had been looking. He didn't point it towards where he had been standing. I noticed later, but at a spot past the trail and into the trees, always at one position. Charlie finally got him to where I was at, and we kept walking. Sam eventually stopped pointing his stick and instead kept it down in front of him, both hands still being used to hold either side of the Y. We ended up driving home, pretty excited that Sam was taking home a souvenir. Our day trip had worked. He was getting involved with life, so I knew we were one step closer to our adventurous son. Over the next couple of days, lots of things started happening. They all seemed strange, not connected in the moment, but later memory would connect them for me. Sam went back to his sleeping routine. He would come home from school, go into his room, and play for a bit by himself while dinner was being made. I got him to work on homework, then served dinner when Charlie got home. After that, he went straight to bed by his own choice. This wasn't abnormal for him, so I wasn't any more concerned than usual. A few nights after we got home, I noticed that Sam's bedroom light was on. Even though he had gone to bed hours ago, his door was closed. So I went to go and turn off his light for him. I figured he might have left it on when he fell asleep or something. But the second I opened the door, Sam leaped off the floor and jumped into bed, like he knew he was in trouble. It was only 7 in the evening. I wasn't about to yell at him for not going to bed when he said he was, but his rapid jump into the bed had me worried. "Sam, what's up?" "Nothing," he said in that kiddish tone that says that I didn't do anything. I looked around the room and saw what I always saw. His toys were out and lined up in some game he must have been playing. Nothing was out of place. "You jumped up as soon as I came in. Is there anything wrong?" "No," he said. "Well, okay," I said slowly, unsure of what else to say. However, he looked at me with untold terror in his eyes. Are you sure there's nothing wrong?" I pressed. "I can hang out with you for a bit if you want." He stared right through me, his eyes wide, and it took him a few seconds to reply. No, Mother. I'm going to bed now. Can you, turn out the light?" I blinked. He's never called me Mother in his life. I should have pushed myself and sat on his bed and talked until he admitted what was wrong. But I didn't. Charlie called my name, and it distracted me. I told him good night and turned off the light and shut the door. Talking later on with Charlie about it, Charlie thought that maybe he had somehow discovered masturbation. Even at his young age, when you rub around on the floor the right way, it just happens. Apparently, that was how he had discovered it. So I chalked the situation up to that. Sam also continued carrying that white stick around everywhere. He always kept it within reach. During dinner, he kept it on the table. When I told him that sticks don't belong on the dining room table, he kept it on his chair next to him. He took it to bed and kept it next to his head. He even took it to school. I tried fighting him on it once, but he claimed that he was taking it to show and tell. I was about to insist that he leave it home, but he looked like he might cry if I came down firm. So I let him on the condition that if his teacher mentioned it to me, that I would make him leave it home, and he agreed. One day, Charlie was taking out the garbage and the bag got caught on the door jamb. The contents of the bag spilled all over the floor, and he quietly cursed and went to get another bag. That was when he found about 20 of Sam's toys in the trash. They varied from stuffed animals to action figures. Confused, Charlie asked me if I had thrown them away, or if I was punishing Sam for something. I told him no, and was equally puzzled. Sam, for some unknown reason, had been throwing his own toys away. Together, after dinner, we sat down with Sam at the table to ask about the toys. We saw it as a cry for help. They were selected, he said in response. They weren't doing a good enough job, so they were fired. Their time was up. Charlie then told Sam that we don't throw toys away because they cost money and we don't waste things. Sam nodded, but I saw his hands clutch the sides of the white stick tightly under the table. I knew he was in stress. Something was going on. We ended the conversation on a light note, and Sam understood why we were upset. He promised not to throw away any more toys, then ran off to bed. I just remember thinking how strange the sentence was. Their time was up. That was an adult line, not something you hear from kids. Sam's school sent an email to all parents about 2 weeks after our hiking trip. The principal pleaded with parents to not let their children come to school if their child was sick, as there was a very serious flu going around the school. He even admitted that 5 teachers and 30 students had been sick over the last week alone. I showed it to Charlie, but he didn't find it as weird as I did. Just tell Sam to wash his hands more often, he said. The final straw for me came a few nights later. It was a Wednesday night when I woke up for no reason. Charlie was snoring next to me, but in between snores, I heard a whisper. Fear seized my throat, and I lifted my head off the pillow slowly to peer at the bedroom door. Someone was moving in the dark, stumbling along. Someone small and short. Irritated, I got up and walked to the door. I saw Sam skip away, as if he were crossing a field of spiders, and was desperate not to get any on his shoes. Sam, I whispered, walking out after him. I turned the corner into the family room, but he wasn't there. That's when I heard bare feet race across the kitchen floor, and that made me angry. The little shit was hiding from me. I walked through the family room and noticed that the clock on the wall was way louder than normal, or maybe I was hypersensitive because I was exhausted. When I entered the kitchen, Sam was facing me. He stood next to the fridge, and the small light from it was showing his expression. He was terrified, and his little white stick was pointed right at me. Sam, I said, annoyed. I need water, he said, still looking at me with his eyes wide open. It was an obvious lie, but not one abnormal for kids caught up past their bedtime. Alright then, get some water, I said. Can, you get it? He asked me, still clutching the stick and pointing it my way. He must have seen my quote-unquote mom look, because he re-emphasized, please. I walked ahead, and that's when I noticed that he pointed the stick around me. He was pointing at something behind me. I looked around really fast and stared into the empty darkness of the family room. The clock was still loud. It sounded like a person saying the actual words. I looked around the room for a full 30 seconds, and nothing moved. What are you doing up, Sam? I asked, turning back to face him. He looked at me with real, true fear in his eyes. The stick was shaking in his hand. Sam, I said, snapping a bit. It's not time yet, he said, barely glancing at me. His gaze was transfixed beyond me. I'm not ready yet. For half a second, I wondered if he was pretending to sleepwalk. Then I wondered if he was actually sleepwalking. Then my tiredness washed over me, and I got annoyed. It's time for bed, I insisted, walking towards him. But still, he kept his eyes behind me, and the stick was pointing into the family room. Okay, he said, defeated as I approached. He took slow, unwilling steps towards the family room. I stood behind him, watching to make sure he went to bed. I saw his head look back and forth, scanning the room as he entered. He was looking for something. Then, he looked back at me, and suddenly, he screamed. With sudden movement, I turned around, hands up and ready to attack whatever was there. But nothing but darkness. and the far kitchen wall. I glared down at him. He was still shaking, pointing his stick into the empty kitchen. But I was beyond annoyed now. The stick had been out of control for weeks. "I think you need a break from this," I said, snatching the stick from his hand. "No," he said. Sam practically leaped at me, but I jumped out the way. This was the only way I assured myself. This stick wasn't healthy after all. "Don't," he cried and yelled, followed me through the family room and into the hall. All the attention that he had pointed into the kitchen was now directed at me. He tried to jump and grab at the stick, but I held it above my head. I felt like an older sibling teasing my younger brother, but this was needed. I regretted waking Charlie up, but I pushed my way into my room, tossed the stick onto the floor, and turned back to get Sam out. "Give it to me, give it to me, give it to me," he demanded. I pushed him out and shut the bedroom door. I flipped the lock on the handle. What's going on?" Charlie mumbled. I took the stick away. He was playing with it all night, I said, coming back to bed. Sam was pounding on the door. I convinced Charlie that we should ignore him, let him tire himself out, and tomorrow we will lecture him. He verbally agreed, even though I could sense that he didn't agree inside. It took an hour, but Sam eventually gave up, and we ended up falling asleep. The next morning, my throat felt like I had swallowed sandpaper. The flu, of course. My stomach rumbled and made me get out of bed. I found myself starting to run to the master bathroom after my stomach turned nauseous. I threw up the dinner from the night before. Stumbling out of the bathroom, I had to move aside for Charlie, who couldn't make it to the toilet and threw up into the sink. "Not you as well," I sighed. "I haven't been this sick since I was a kid," he moaned, rinsing his mouth out. I rubbed my eyes, still tired from Sam's ordeal last night, and got into the shower with the lights off, hoping it would help my light sensitivity. Charlie decided to call in sick and rest for the day. I got ready for the day, so I wouldn't be around in my pajamas all day, feeling even more sick. When I was completely ready, I unlocked the bedroom door and stepped out. Sam was nowhere in sight, which actually meant that he had gone back to bed. Good. "I hope you're getting ready for school," I said loudly, but I didn't get a response. I went to his room and found the door shut as usual. I twisted the handle and pushed, but the door was stuck. "What the hell?" I said quietly. Using my shoulder, I shoved hard against the door. I heard a clatter. Then the door opened. As I entered, I saw three things right away. 1. A chair had been placed under the door handle in order to prevent the door from opening so easily. 2. The window was wide open, with the screen missing. And 3. Sam wasn't in his bedroom. We called the police immediately after searching the house from top to bottom. If we hadn't called them, I have no idea where we would have started. Maybe we should have driven around, looking for him. Maybe called his friends' homes to see if they knew where he was. The police helped, and I spent half a day sitting by the phone, puking my guts out and worrying about Sam. The police were out driving around, searching for Sam with his picture taped to their dashboards. Charlie was dead asleep when I went into the bedroom. I was debating about lying down, but I couldn't sleep while Sam was missing. I saw the stick, which had landed partially under the bed when I threw it last night. All this because of a stick. Maybe the doctor was wrong. Maybe he did have something wrong with him. But it was mental, psychological. Maybe instead of a doctor, we should take him to a psychologist. Attempting to stay awake, I decided to search the house for the 15th time, but this time, I carried the stick with me. "Sam!" Loud enough to be heard while I walked through the family room, the kitchen, and to the stairs. Maybe he was hiding in the storage room downstairs, maybe behind a few boxes. "Sam," I said again, "I have your stick. I'm sorry I took it. Please come out. You're not in trouble." I descended the stairs, and halfway down, I thought I heard him reply. It was faint, far away. The words were impossible to make out. "Sam!" I cried desperately, spinning around on the stairs to try to figure out if he was upstairs or downstairs. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a leg move around the corner at the bottom of the stairs, towards the storage room. I was correct. I knew it. I sped down the stairs and turned the corner. The door was closed. I tried to twist the handle, but he had locked it. I pleaded while reaching for the key at the top of the door frame. When he didn't unlock the door, I stuck the key in and twisted the handle. The door popped open to reveal our pitch-black storage room. The room was in the middle of the house and had no windows. It contained our water heater and the control system for the heat and AC. The room was so large, Charlie had built shelves for us to keep our seasonal decorations, our camping supplies, and extra food and water. "Sam," I said more quietly, feeling uneasy. Something about the room was getting to me. "How does the clock tick, Mother?" Sam said from somewhere in the room. I froze. The word mother made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Something's not right. "Sam, come on out now," I said. There was light spilling in from the doorway, but it didn't illuminate enough of the room for me to search. I slowly stepped towards the center of the room, where a string was hanging down from a single light in the ceiling. With one hand, I kept a hold of the stick. With the other, I reached out to search for the string. I couldn't see it, but I knew it was there somewhere. Suddenly, the door slammed shut, and at that exact instant, my hand brushed against hair. Long, greasy hair at my shoulder height. Sam wasn't that tall. The hair was tangled and long. I yelped and jumped back, startled by the door and the hair at the same time. Then I heard Sam giggle. "Do you know how the clock ticks?" It came from my left, along the wall. The hair had been to my right. What else was in here with us? I was paralyzed. I couldn't see a damn thing. My phone was upstairs, so I couldn't use that as a flashlight. The ceiling light was somewhere in front of me, and the door was somewhere behind me. But every time I would reach out, I remembered touching the greasy hair and recoiled. "Charlie!" I called upward, hoping he could hear me, hoping he was awake. "Tick, tock, tick, tock," Sam said again. My brain instantly remembered the sound the clock had made the night before. It was the same voice, faintly a voice, and faintly background noise at the same time. "Sam," I whispered, but I had to throw up again. I swallowed the bile and felt one more time for the string. It brushed my hand, and I jumped back before realizing that I was feeling the string, not greasy hair. Relieved, I launched my hand out and grabbed at the string. It swung into my hand and I yanked on it hard. The single light buzzed to life, and something moved to my right. I screamed at the top of my lungs when I saw white and black. It's taken me a long time to place the shape, but now I'm sure. The skull of a deer, partially covered by stringy hair, darted away from the light, circling behind me. In absolute terror, I squeezed my eyes shut and didn't dare open them. In the battle for fight or flight, I buried my head hoping it didn't see me. I started sobbing and wanted to run for the door, but I was too scared to open my eyes. "Mommy," Sam called from my left. I didn't respond. I was sobbing too hard. "Mommy, help. I'm stuck." Very, very slowly, I moved one finger and looked to the side. Sam was huddled up on the top shelf. I couldn't see his face, but I saw jeans and his favorite shirt. "Sam, come on down and let's go," I whispered. I can't. It's gonna get me," Sam was whimpering. I tried hard not to sob again. "Please, come get me." I fought through the fear and stepped towards the shelf, still covering my face and using a small gap in my fingers to navigate. When I reached the shelf, I closed my eyes and held my arms up. "Climb into my arms, Sam. I'll get you down, and then we'll go get your dad." My voice started breaking at the end. I'm stuck. My shirt is caught." he cried. Alright, I said, trying to be brave for him. Guide my hand to where it's at, and I'll get you loose. He paused. It's at the back of the shelf. You can't reach. I bit my lip to stop its trembling. With both eyes still closed, I placed my hands on the top shelf, and my foot on the bottom shelf. The stick was placed on the shelf so I could use both my hands. I pulled myself up so I could reach and balance myself. Where is it? I asked, refusing to open my eyes. Reach here, he said, and I could feel him rotate so I could reach over him. I did, and that's when my hand ran straight into a mess of tangle, greasy hair. My eyes opened in shock. It stared back at me for only half a second, but in that split second, it spoke.
Do you know how the clock ticks? It's fed by death.
The shelf under my feet collapsed, and as I fell, my hands pulled the shelf until it came over, coming down on top of me. I woke up in the hospital, much to Charlie and Sam's relief. There was a lot of information and questions. They asked why I was down there, and instead of sounding insane, I said that I had been searching for Sam again, just in case. Sam had been found walking on the road in the general direction of the hiking spot. He wasn't very far, thankfully, and was unharmed. When Charlie practically yelled, asking why the hell he had left in the middle of the night alone, Sam said he needed to find another stick to stop the monsters. The police were, of course, recommending that he talk to a psychologist. Then he overheard the conversation. Charlie didn't wake up until the police were at our door with Sam in hand. That was about an hour after the shelf had collapsed on me. Sam and Charlie had gone looking for me in the house and found me under the collapsed shelf. The police had been right there, thankfully, and I was rushed off to the hospital. Some of my ribs were broken, and so was my left leg. The shelf that had collapsed on me held our camping tent, the fake Christmas tree, and a few other half-empty boxes. I was lucky it wasn't the shelf that was holding the food. The door was locked when they got to it, and the key wasn't in the lock, so they had to break it down. The second that Sam saw the scene, he apparently stood over me in a protective stance, looking all around. Charlie left to get the police before they left upstairs. A couple of days after I got released from the hospital, and after Charlie had recovered from a flu that knocked him off his feet, I finally got a chance to talk to Sam. I asked him right away what was going on. It took a few minutes of him denying that anything was wrong. I saw the monster, I admitted, which a parent really shouldn't do to their child. You did? He asked. I nodded. You and Dad never saw them before. When did you see them? Them? I asked nervously. That's when Sam told me what had been happening for the last few weeks. He had stumbled upon the stick by tripping over it. He said that the stick had spoken to him, and he took it to play with it. He said that whenever he had the stick, he could see the monsters. They were scary, but they stayed away when I would point the stick at them. A few of them had followed us home, walking alongside us on the trail. They came into the house at night and snuck around. They came into Sam's room, our room, everywhere. They told me that someone had to die. They told me that you had to die. So he offered the monsters toy sacrifices to satisfy their hunger. But he said that wasn't enough. Whenever I didn't have the stick, I could feel them try to grab me, but they stayed away whenever I had the stick. They kept telling me that your time was up. The time of who? I said. Yours, Mom, Sam said. They sat with him at night. They tried to convince him to put the stick down. They would offer him candy. At school, they followed him and said they would hurt people until he put away the stick. 5 teachers and 30 students ended up getting the flu. He held onto the stick as often as he could and patrolled the house at night to keep them out of my room. That was until I took the stick. Apparently, he had grabbed the stick from a skeleton in the woods. It looked like an animal skeleton. He had seen another one just like it when he got the first one, so he was going to go back and get the second one so that the monsters would stop smiling. One had actually followed him on the streets, he said, but now they were all gone. And after looking through the mess of the collapsed shelves, so was the stick. Sam told his psychologist about our conversation. His psychologist told me very angry that I shouldn't have admitted to him anything like that, because it would actually feed into his delusions. So now he was being looked at for any other possible conditions. I'm starting to think I should be tested too. How else do I explain everything that happened? One detail stands out that I can't explain though. I had unlocked the door to the storage room and left the key in the handle. So why was the key found dangling from the light bulb string? Hey everyone, I could really use some help here as I'm starting to get really worried. Last night, I was followed by a very creepy lady when I was out hiking in my local trails at state land. I have hiked and hunted these trails my whole life, and not once have I encountered anything like this. Don't get me wrong, I had my fair share of scary things happen to me when I gone solo camping, but this has scared me right to the bone, and now I think I'm being followed. Let me explain what's been going on, and hopefully one of you may be able to help me out here. Last night, Christmas Eve, I had nothing to do as I have no kids, no wife, and my parents live 3 hours away. So to kill some time and not be bored, I had the idea of going on a solo hike through our local trails. Like I said, I have hiked these trails many times. This time, however, I'll never forget. I got out to the trailhead about 5 p.m. I had my headlamp on, and I knew these trails like the back of my hand, so I wasn't too concerned with the sunlight quickly fading. I don't know if any of you are from Michigan, but we're having a surprisingly sunny and warm December. However, it still gets dark here around 5:30. The weather was beautiful and perfect for a nighttime walk. We don't have too many nice winter days like this, so I wanted to take full advantage and enjoy warm night air. So I got out of my truck and started up the trailhead. This specific trail I was on started out in dense pine trees, and after a mile or so, it opened up to these awesome valleys with huge fields. Most of the time, if I was quiet enough and looked around, I could see some deer grazing and other wildlife. This time though, there was nothing. I was quite surprised there wasn't a single animal, considering how beautiful of a night it was. Now that I think about it, I didn't see or hear even a squirrel in the pines, which is very uncommon. There are many in these parts, and no matter the time, I can always hear them running and playing in the trees. This time, it was dead quiet. I kept on walking though, and just enjoyed the peace and quiet. Once I exited the pines and entered the first field, I started to get this nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach, like something was watching me. I chalked it up to me being paranoid because of the lack of wildlife, and continued on. I wish I would have turned back right then and there, but if I did, I wouldn't be here telling you the story, would I? Anyways, I continued on and the feeling just intensified as I progressed. At this point, I was a good mile and a half in, and it dawned on me, if there was something out here with me, I was screwed. Not a single person knew that I was out here. I never had cell phone reception in this area. If some kind of animal was stalking me, I would just be done for. I was kicking myself in the ass for not bringing my handgun with me, honestly. We don't have a whole lot of dangerous game here in central Michigan, so I didn't think twice about it when leaving. I was nearing the end of the first field, and before I stepped into the next little section of pines, I decided to take a quick look around, just to satisfy that nagging feeling in the back of my mind. At first, I didn't see anything, but just as I was about to turn back around, something caught my attention. There was slight movement, back about 100 yards behind me. What the heck? I whispered as I squinted to get a better look. I wasn't sure, but it looked like a figure, half hidden behind a bush. I stared closely, and when I saw it shift slightly, my heart leaped into my throat. The figure was definitely humanoid, and it appeared to be staring right at me. "Hey," I foolishly called out, hoping whoever it was would simply identify itself. As soon as I said that, the figure quickly ducked behind the bush, disappearing from my view. My heart was racing pretty good at this point, a million worst-case scenarios running through my mind. I couldn't help but think it was a serial killer, ready to pounce and stab me to death, stashing my body in these woods. I turned around and started walking a little faster, trying to distance myself from whoever was out here with me. To my horror, I heard twigs and sticks snapping a little ways behind me as the person started to follow me. "I have a gun," I shouted, trying to scare them into leaving me alone. I looked back over my shoulder to see where they were at, and when I did, my heart started hammering in my chest. I swear I thought I was gonna pass out. The person was now maybe 20 feet behind me, and I could tell it was a woman, except that her jaw was hung open, as if in complete shock, her eyes open extremely wide, staring directly at me. When I first turned around, she was still walking, and the way she moved scared me so bad it sent me into a dead sprint upon looking at her. I know it sounds kinda funny, but believe me, it wasn't. She was tiptoeing as quiet as she could, in the same way a cartoon character would try to be sneaky. Her legs taking these huge, lanky steps. Everything about the way she looked and moved just sent these shivers down my spine. "Leave me alone," I shouted as I ran away as fast as I could. That's when I started to hear her laughing as she chased me. She was no longer trying to be quiet, as I could hear her crashing through the woods, catching up to me rather quickly. I decided to turn and run off the trail once I rounded a bend, where I knew she couldn't see me for a moment. As soon as I stepped off, I quickly hid behind a tree and turned off my headlamp. After a couple of seconds, I heard the sound of her heavy, odd footsteps as she got closer and closer. I held my breath and slammed my eyes shut, sending a quick prayer to the Lord above to just let her pass. Her horrible laughing sounds echoed through the woods as she thankfully ran past me. As soon as her footsteps sounded a little further down, I jumped out from behind the tree and took off running back the way I came. I hadn't even gotten 20 feet when I heard a blood-curdling scream coming from behind me in the woods. I ran faster than I ever had in my life, running on pure adrenaline and the will to live. I just knew if she caught me, I wouldn't make it, and it would be a horrible, painful way to die. The sound of her footsteps once again got louder and louder as she got closer. How the hell was she running so fast? I felt a huge wave of relief as I saw the entrance to the trail, maybe 100 feet ahead. Somehow, I ran even faster as I knew my truck would be right there. I digged into my pockets and fished my keys out. She let out another hideous scream as she got even closer, maybe 50 feet behind me now. I got into my truck and jumped in, putting my keys in the ignition and starting it in record time. I backed out and peeled out of there as fast as I could without losing control. After one final scream of frustration, I looked in my rearview mirror to watch the woods disappear. The whole drive home I kept checking behind me, afraid I would see her chasing after me, even though I knew it would be impossible at 60 miles per hour. 5 minutes later, I pulled into my driveway and jumped out of the truck once parked, running full blast inside. I slammed the door behind me and locked it. I ran all around my house, locking every window and door, not feeling safer until I knew I was locked up and safe. I walked upstairs to my bedroom and laid in bed. After a little while, I must have passed out from being exhausted. I awoke to the pitch black room and quiet house. My heart started racing as I remembered the lady from the forest, and I jumped up to look out my window. "No," I whispered as I looked in my backyard. The lady from the woods was standing in my backyard, slack-jawed and staring right up at me. My heart once again pounded so hard I thought I would faint. As soon as she noticed me, she smiled this huge, impossible, wide ear-to-ear grin. She then shrieked that awful scream again and ran back into the woods. Needless to say, I didn't sleep after that. And that's why I'm here. If anyone has an idea what the hell this lady is, as I know there's no way she's human, can someone please let me know? Maybe give me some advice on what to do here. Thanks in advance. My father died about 5 years ago, unexpectedly, from a heart attack. To say it was difficult on my mother and I was an understatement. Our old house in Knoxville just didn't feel like home anymore. About a year later, Mom and I made plans to take ourselves and our elderly dog, Ace, on a move further south to a small town situated about half an hour from ATL. Just a few days before we were supposed to move, I had one of the most vivid dreams I ever come to experience. All that was within my dream was my bedroom, a picture perfect of the real thing. I sometimes wonder if it was in some sort of sleep paralysis state when it occurred. To further add to the dream's realism, in the middle of the night, the street lights right across the street would illuminate through my window, creating a light reflection on the wall perpendicular. In my dream, as I lay there staring at the exact reflection on the wall, I saw an orb of smoke fading from the shadows. Goosebumps chilled across my skin as I lay there panicked and afraid to move a muscle. Suddenly, it stopped moving and hung in the light's reflection, as if it was staring at me. Without warning, it spoke to me. In my dead father's voice, I'm sending something to watch you. Despite hearing my father's voice come from the orb, I became terrified. I'm not sure why, and yet I managed to let out a small reply towards it. "What?" I whispered. The orb stayed silent for a few moments, leaving an eerie dead silence in the voice's place. Just as quickly, it spoke to me one final time. "Down, Black." I woke up almost instantly, gasping for breath. The nightmare had chilled me to my core. I'm not sure exactly what to make of it, especially those two final words. I chalked it up to maybe Dad wishing us well on our move, but at the time, I couldn't shake the feeling it was some kind of warning. Within the next couple of weeks, my mother and I moved out of Knoxville and headed south to Georgia. She had managed to find a little house for us, with only one or two neighbors down a gravel road in the middle of the woods. It was a nice fit for us. The best reliever of all the stress that came with the move was our new neighbor's cat. She was a petite, older black cat that gravitated towards me almost instantly, and I treated her as if she was my own pet. I left out a can of food once or twice a week for her, and even if I didn't call out for her, when she saw me outside, she would always run up to me. She actually helped me ease my tensions about leaving Knoxville behind, especially without Dad there with us. Less than a month into our new home, I woke up suddenly to a faint coughing noise that sounded like it was coming from downstairs. One thing to know about our dog Ace, he has a condition in his trachea. He needs medicine to help calm the condition down, so I'm used to waking up in the middle of the night to give him his medicine. I proceeded downstairs from my bedroom to give him his cough medicine, but I couldn't find him anywhere throughout the house. He wasn't in his bed sleeping. He wasn't in the kitchen. He was nowhere to be found. I didn't check my mom's bedroom because I didn't want to wake her up. Besides, I wouldn't have heard the coughing if he was in there anyways, so I just let it be. That's when I heard the cough again, but it was coming from further away, as if it was from outside. I looked over at the side patio door leading out into the woods, and realized I had forgot to close it. There it stood, slightly open. Shit, I thought to myself, he got out. I immediately ran outside with a flashlight and started calling out for my dog. "Ace! Ace!" I shouted into the trees. I heard another cough and shined my light in its direction. This time it had echoed from down the gravel road. I thought my dog was lost, and I chalked it up to new house jitters. So I said, "Ace, come on boy." "Home's this way, buddy." That's when I heard it. The cough that I had been following, almost right beside me. But this time, it didn't stay like the dry cough I had been hearing. Instead, the cough had slowly descended into a low growl. I shined my light towards the new sound, and there stood a bright red fox in the middle of the path. I figured it was some kind of sick fox I had mistaken for my dog. The whole time, as I was processing what I was seeing, it stared directly at me. Its eyes glowed from the light of my flashlight. However, our stare broke when it tilted its head to the right. I looked down, and there she was, our neighbor's little black cat standing beside me. However, it was as if she had completely changed who she was. She was no longer the happy, affectionate cat that I had come to know. Instead, she had her back arched upright, every fiber of hair standing at attention, and she let out the lowest growl I had ever heard. In that moment, I figured she was just scared of the fox, so I knelt down beside her in a bid to move her away and avoid the fox hurting her. But no matter how many times I tried to move her out of fight mode, she wouldn't budge. Her stare remained unfazed. That's when I looked towards the direction of the fox once more. But there wasn't a fox standing there anymore. Instead, in the exact same spot of that gravel road, was a walking, rotting corpse of a roadkill coyote, slowly moving towards me. I took a step back, absolutely horrified of what I was seeing. Its jaw was hanging loose from its face. One of its eyes was stained with blood, and it wobbled back and forth as if it was desperately fighting pain. I rubbed my eyes out of disbelief, hoping I was imagining it, hoping I was dreaming it, but it was still there when my eyes reopened. Despite the sight before us, our neighbor's black cat, no matter how tiny she was, stood there and kept growling at the creature. Suddenly, it stopped. The creature had ceased its walk towards us. For a moment, it just stood there, glancing back and forth between myself and this little black cat that was trying to defend me. That's when I heard this creature say two words in a low voice: "Down, Black." In a flash, the creature ran straight into the woods. I shined my flashlight in its direction, but it had completely vanished. Even the brush it had ran through looked untouched. That's when the cat, still standing beside me, calmed herself down, almost as if nothing had happened. She rubbed herself up against my leg, returning to her normal, loving mood. Despite technically not being mine, I proceeded to scoop her up and run back into the house. Before heading upstairs with the little black cat snuggled up in my arms, I decided to poke my head into my mother's room. Laying on the floor, sound asleep, was Ace. He had been there the entire time. I quietly closed her door before going upstairs. I made sure that the little cat slept with me in my bed that night. From the research I'd done, I think I was almost a victim of some kind of skinwalker. It must have picked up the sounds my dog sometimes makes late at night, knowing that I would likely come to his aid. And for whatever reason, our neighbor's black cat had scared it so badly, it scrambled away. I haven't seen it since that night. Maybe because that cat still likes to wander down the gravel road late at night. Or maybe that thing just decided I wasn't worth the trouble. Either way, whether I have my father or pure luck to thank, I leave a can of food out every single night for that little black cat. And you know the most ironic part of everything? That cat's name is Halloween. I'm a bird hunter who lives in Oregon. I have a Flushing dog I train to hunt. His name is Reggie, who I take out most weekends of the hunting season to look for quail or whatever else there is. For the last 3 years, The only meat I have ate from mid-September through the end of January has been the birds my dog and I hunt. Also the elk or deer that I usually bag during the season. It's actually something I've become pretty passionate about. 2 weekends ago was the end of quail, so I planned a day trip out to East Oregon. For those who don't know, most of Oregon is essentially a desert. The area between the Cascade Mountains and the Pacific is rainy and forested. However, with the exception of a few small mountain ranges, 2/3 of the state east of the Cascades is just red rocks, brush, and country for hundreds of miles, all the way to the Idaho border. Even though it's quite cold this time of the year, it's still amazingly beautiful, with literally millions of acres of public land. I loaded Reggie and my gear into the truck early Saturday morning, several hours before sunrise, and set off. Just at first light we got to a big, open river valley. I have spent lots of time exploring, but this certain area was new to me. It was about 30 degrees. Looked like a light dusting of snow the night before, but otherwise pretty dry, and would be a fairly clear day. I love these moments, maybe more than anything in life. Being the only human in a massive wild landscape without a single trail or building for miles, the isolation, the giddiness of the upcoming adventure, the feeling of exploring an area that looked the same 500 years ago, the feeling of going out to get my own food, the contrast between hot coffee in my thermos and the cold winter wind on my exposed hands. All of it, just my favorite place to be. I got the dog ready and put on my boots and pack, loaded the shotgun, and we set off along the top of the valley ridge, 600 to 700 yards above the river, looking over the cold landscape. For those who never seen it, watching a hunting dog work is a truly fascinating spectacle to behold. It's honestly why I enjoy upland bird hunting so much. To me, watching a really good hunting dog actively hunt for wild game birds is honestly not that much different from watching a trained dolphin or sea lion at SeaWorld or something like that. A work dog doing its job can be so focused and intelligent, it's shocking sometimes. I trained Reggie well, but so much of it is just primal. It's Reggie's 6th hunting season, so we spend hundreds of days off trail, exploring the backcountry, and we have really learned to read each other well. Coastal rainforest, high desert, alpine mountains, hardwood forest, farmland, swamps, marshes. We have adventured through it all together. If there's a game bird near, Reggie sells it. I can tell by the way that he moves his tail, the frequency of sniffing, and the lateral angles of his turns. I can tell if he smells another person from how he looks back at me. I can tell if he smells a coyote, wolf, bear, or mountain lion from how he drops his spine. I can tell if he smells an elk, deer, or moose from how he tilts his head to catch the wind. He's my best friend, and we're actually a real, solid team. About an hour after we started hiking along the valley ridge, we came to a gully that cut downhill through the ridge towards the river, which we would have to cross. I picked the way down the steep rise to the other dry, boulder-filled creek bed at the bottom of the gully, where a deer trail led back up to the other side. Halfway down the slope, Reggie started acting real strange. He stopped about 30 feet in front of me, cocked his head to the side, and fixed his gaze down to our left, towards the spot in the dry creek bed as it dropped down the valley. He then leaned his head, as if trying to get a better view, and then started turning around towards me without pulling his eyes off the spot, which he really only does when he's actually scared of something, like when we go to the vet, or I start up a chainsaw. Then he bolted up the steep side of the gully to where I was standing. "What is it, bud?" He kept switching his gaze from my eyes to the same spot below us, while pacing around in half circles. Strange. My first thought was mountain lion. which I always have at the back of my mind. They're all over the place out here. But they clear out long before they let people, let alone a person with a dog, get this close to them. We got across this gully and keep moving, so I patted the dog on the head and kept on moving down towards the bottom of the gully. Reggie stayed right on my heels the entire time. The bottom of the gully was a dry creek bed loaded with car-sized boulders, with a lot of rocks and gravel running between the rock formations and steep, grassy walls of the gully. As I was crunching over the gravel, Reggie stopped in the middle of the creek bed and once again was fixed on something to our left, down the gully. This time he dropped his spine and I could see his hackles raise. Oh shit, I thought. Maybe there is some kind of animal in the rocks down there. I flipped the safety off my shotgun and started talking to Reggie in the quote-unquote cute buddy tone I use when I'm trying to calm him down. I started walking towards a big boulder in the middle of the creek bed that was blocking my view. Looked like once I was past it, I would have a clear field of view over the entire gully, all the way down to the valley side of the river. Reggie was still frozen in place. I patted his head as I passed on his right side. Once I got a few paces past him, I noticed he wasn't following me, which he always did, even if it was a bear ahead of us. I looked back at him. Let's go, bud. Let's go get it. He started pacing around in half circles again, with his ears back and his tail down. What the fuck, I thought. Definitely never seen him do this before. Unless again, we're like at the vet. I seen him chase 400-pound black bears off my property and squabble with countless coyotes. He's not scared of much. This got me pretty anxious. I shouldered my shotgun and decided that before we keep moving, at this point, checking behind the boulder where something had the dog all tweaked out was a safe thing to do. So I moved quickly. In my experience dealing with black bears and mountain lions, 99.9% of the times you bump into one, they're terrified and run away as fast as they possibly can, especially when surprised by something with confident movement that's making lots of noises. But definitely don't do this with a grizzly bear. I heard Reggie start following me as I started to move around the boulder. I came around the big rock on the right side, and in front of me was a big clearing in the creek bed and a huge, big horned sheep, a ram, no more than 25 feet in front of me. We run into big horned sheep out in this country all the time, so it wasn't that much of a surprise. What was surprising was how this thing was sitting. That's the only way I can think to describe it. It was sitting on its folded back legs, like a dog or cat would, holding itself up with a straight back posture, with its front legs locked in the gravel, staring straight ahead, so I couldn't see its face. These are very skittish animals. They would never let a person get this close. A bunch of things went through my mind at the same time. Maybe it's dead. No, it was cold, and I could see steam coming from its slow breathing. Maybe it's wounded and dying. Maybe it's stuck on some old fencing or something. Right then, Reggie started barking. Not just barking, but like snarl barking, like he was in a fight. He's a pretty quiet dog generally, and he never barks at deer, elk, or rams. Maybe prances after them for a few seconds. That's if we bump into one when we're hiking and we spook it. But he's never been very interested in big mammals. It actually startled me. I looked back at him, and he had his front legs splayed out. His head was down. His tail was down. His hackles were raised up so high that he didn't even look like Reggie no more. And he was fully showing his teeth and barking and snarling like I never seen. He looked feral, like a coyote. I could hear the snap of his teeth as he barked again and again. I looked back at the ram, still, just sitting there, unmoving, staring straight ahead. Now that was fucking strange. I never known a wild mammal to do anything but run away. terrified at the presence of a canine, let alone not even move a muscle with a canine being aggressive. I was pretty convinced at that point that the ram had to be real sick or super fucked up in some way. Definitely close to death, even if it was tangled up on something, or maybe he had got trapped in a leg snare. It would be freaking the hell out with a dog going crazy next to it, the way Reggie was. "Reggie, here!" I yelled to him. Here is sort of my catch-all command for him, meaning, stop what you're doing and get to my heels right fucking now. Reggie didn't even look at me. I took my shotgun in my left hand, turned and took a step towards the dog and pointed at the ground in front of me, and pretty much screamed, "Reggie, here!" Again, nothing. He just kept barking and snarling at the ram. That really put me on edge. He had never just completely ignored a firm command before. It's like I wasn't even there. I turned back to the ram and shouldered my shotgun again. Something was wrong. Real fucking wrong. All my years spent in the backcountry, hunting and tracking big game animals. I mean, I literally have guided ram hunts professionally, just one valley over, and I had never seen anything like this. The wind was picking up down the gully. I felt its bite on my hands. The light dusting of snow from the night before was getting whipped up around the gully. I started moving around the ram to its right, trying to gain some elevation to stay somewhat above it. As I rounded its position to get a look at its face. Bighorn sheep don't attack people. They're skittish as hell, so I wasn't scared of that. But this thing seemed unwell, so I figured all bets were off. As I was sidestepping around it, the wind in the gully started messing with the pressure in my ears. I felt like I was landing while inside an airplane, and my eyes popping slightly dulled the volume of Reggie snarling and barking, and the wind howling down around the rocks. My heart was pounding pretty good at this point. I got to a spot about 8 feet directly to its right, and about 3 to 4 feet above it, up the slope of the gully, and could start to make out its face. My heart rate was going insane, uniquely so, to the point I actually noticed the pressure change made it so I could hear my heartbeat thundering in my ears and feeling it in my cheeks and eyes. It felt like I had taken a few Red Bulls, then sprinted a mile. Trying to calm myself down and get a grip only made me more jumpy and anxious. I took another step and could see its mouth. It was slightly open, with milky snot running from its nose and saliva dripping from its bottom lip, with little spurts and flecks shooting out every time it exhaled a steamy breath. What the fuck? I kept saying out loud. I took another step and could start to see its eyes behind the big, full curls of its horns, which were pocked with scars and abrasions from a lifetime of fighting other rams and existing in this hard, rocky country. I took another step so I was able to essentially look at it from the front for the first time and see its full features. It had tears pouring out of its eyes, and it sounded almost like it was moaning. Alright, I thought, this thing is incredibly fucked up. Is it a virus or something? Is its lower spine broken? I wanted to put it out of its misery, but shooting a bighorn sheep without a license is a felony with a $15,000 fine. So I started thinking about hiking back and calling the fish and game officers. I lowered my shotgun and was about to turn to go back towards the dog when it snapped its head up to the right and looked right at me. Until my last day alive, I will never forget that moment. All the wind was knocked out of me, or sucked out of me. It felt like I was free falling with my stomach in my throat. I couldn't move. I pissed myself, just straight up urinated in my pants for the first time since I was a baby. Tears started rolling out of my eyes down my cheeks. My hands and feet went numb. I didn't notice the dog move, but Reggie was suddenly right at my feet, with a strap from my backpack in its mouth, pulling on it as hard as he could, as though we were playing tug of war, yanking me back the way I had come. But I couldn't move. I couldn't raise my shotgun. couldn't look away from the ram. I was stuck. Then, the ram started weeping. That's the only way I can describe it. Fucking weeping. It didn't move its body, only its head. But it was whimpering and weeping, like a fucking person. Its facial features became very human. Its eyes bulged. Its bottom lip was quivering. It was whimpering out noises like it was trying to speak between sobs, while sucking in air like a crying child would. Then, unmistakably, it started speaking, or more like it started pleading. Don't go. Don't go. Don't go. It was increasing gradually, from a whimpering pleading to a desperate screaming. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I felt like I was gonna throw up, or had already thrown up. After what felt like about 15 seconds, my dog finally yanked on my pack hard enough to get me to stumble, and I lost my footing. I couldn't move my leg to replace my foot, so I went down to one knee, then buckled ahead down the slope, rolling onto a shoulder, and finally breaking my eye contact with the ram. The second I broke eye contact with that thing, I could breathe again, and the sensation of falling went away. Reggie was whining and barking now, right in my face, licking my cheek, yanking me away from where I had fallen. I pushed myself on my palms and just screamed, "Go!" to the dog and grabbed my shotgun and half sprinted, half crawled up the hill out of the gully as fast as I could. The screams of the ram were getting louder. It started to hurt my ears. Reggie was ahead of me, stopping every 20 feet or so to look at me and bark towards the noise. I could see the dog was shaking like a leaf. The screaming started to turn into a single, unbroken roar that sounded half beast and half wind. The pressure in my head was so bad that a throbbing reddish blackness flooded my vision, and I could barely see. I just kept crawling and scrambling towards my dog's barking, and eventually crossed the crest of the slope at the top of the gully and was on flat ground again atop the valley ridge. Right then, the roaring stopped, the wind died down, and I felt the pressure in my head give way. The darkness faded from my vision, and the light of the day filled the world again. I stood up and jogged a short distance, until a thirst like I had never felt came over me. I collapsed at the base of a rock and caught Reggie over. I took like 25 gulps of water out of my camelback. I realized I had thrown up all over myself at some point while scrambling out of the gully, or maybe before, and had a few deep cuts in my palms and knuckles. Reggie was still shaking like he had just come out of an ice bath, and whining as though he was hurt. I checked him for injuries, but he seemed alright, so I gave him some water and put an arm around him trying to calm him down a bit. I wiped as much of the dirt and snow-caked vomit off my coat, while keeping an eye and a shotgun barrel trained on the crest of the gully, expecting with a deep dread to see ram horns slowly coming over the crest. But they didn't. After a minute or so, I got my shit together. I took another sip of water, stood up and booked it the entire 3 miles or so back to the truck, jogging the entire way. As soon as I could see my truck, I fumbled my keys out of my coat pocket, unlocked it, and bolted straight for the driver's side door. I threw the dog into the passenger seat, the gun into the back seat, and piled in behind the wheel without even taking my pack off. I fired the engine up and tore down the dirt road much faster than it was safe. I got to the highway and didn't stop until we were in my driveway. It's been 2 weeks since that day, and I still haven't been able to sleep a full night or talk to anyone about it. The hell would I tell people without them thinking I lost my mind? Reggie has never liked sleeping in my bed before, but he's been curled up as close as he can to me every night since then. I have no way to explain what happened out there. I have no clue what it was controlling or possessing that animal. But I know one thing. It felt like there was a person inside that ram. It felt like a person's spirit was stuck in there and desperately wanted out. However, based on the way my dog was acting, I got the feeling that if I did end up helping it, I wouldn't have ever left that gully. I am sincerely terrified, in a way I have never known possible. I haven't told this story in a long time. It happened to me in October, about 6 years ago. I told 4 or 5 people since then, and nobody believed me. I had a lot of time to think about it since then, and I think I'm finally ready to post my story somewhere. It's about a weekend I spent in the national forest. I had been planning the trip for weeks. I made sure I had the weekend off work. I didn't make any plans. I started buying supplies a week before I went. I was gonna go camping in the forest near my town. I had been camping before when I was a little kid with my parents, but never as an adult, and never by myself, and never in this forest. So I was pretty excited. Now I'm not stupid. I took all the necessary precautions. I told a few of my friends where I was going, when I was going, and when I would be back. I told them if I go missing to call the cops and all of that. I brought an extra phone battery and enough food and water to last me a fucking week. I even brought along my firearm that my dad gave me when I turned 18. I never shot the damn thing, but I figured it would at least scare off whatever the hell wanted to mess with me. I'm telling you all this so you know that I'm not just some dumb kid who decided that he wanted to take a trip to the forest one day and shit himself because of what he saw. I knew what I was getting into. I was ready, just not for, well, this. So enough backstory, I'll get on with it. I left around 6 in the morning. It's an hour drive from my place, so I was expecting to get there around 7. I ended up getting there at 7:30, but I didn't mind. It was a lovely day, not a cloud in the sky, great weather. So I was pretty satisfied with the time that I got there. I parked my car ways away from the forest, in a little clearing off the side of the road where I knew I would find it. I gathered all my things, had a little snack, and headed off towards the forest. The next few hours are kind of boring, so I'll skip over them. All you need to know is that I made my way into the forest and set up camp. I cooked myself lunch on the crummy campfire I made around noon. I saw a pair of birds dancing at each other. I even took a few pictures of some deer I saw with my phone. I couldn't get a good shot, but at least it's proof that I was there. However, something seemed off. You see, the forest is normally kinda loud. Not like city loud, but there's this constant background noise that is always going on. Rustling in the bushes, leaves, birds chirping, and animals prancing around. When I first got into the forest, that was all well and good. But the later it got, the sounds just started to go away. It took the better part of the day for me to notice. Birds stopped chirping, the bushes stopped rustling. I stopped seeing animals too. That's actually what made me notice. At around 4 in the afternoon, I realized that I hadn't seen a bird in a while. It actually kinda creeped me out a little bit. But I brushed it off and kept enjoying the stay. I was feeling kinda lonely, with everything being so quiet, so I called up a friend and talked with him till sundown. After that, I realized it was getting late, so I hung up. I ate again and put out the fire. After a final assessment of my surroundings and looking at the night sky, I crawled into my tent to sleep. I kept my gun loaded right next to where I slept, just in case, you know. Sleeping on the cold ground in the middle of a forest isn't that easy if you aren't used to it. And considering I hadn't done it since I was a child, I was having a little trouble. It was around 2 hours after I had laid down that I started hearing something in nature again. Now, if I had heard bushes rustling a few hours earlier, this would have been cause for celebration. But even Bear Grylls himself would have gotten creeped out if this was the only thing that he had heard all night. So I did what any rational human would have done and clung to the gun like it was the only thing keeping me from falling off a cliff. There was silence for a few minutes. The only thing I could hear was my own shaky breath. Then, No crunching of leaves or snapping of twigs. Just the same. It was getting louder, closer to my tent. I tried to peer through the fabric that separated me from nature, but I couldn't make out a silhouette. I clutched the rifle harder, scared as any person would. I remember being sure that I would be safe though. Even bears are rare to attack camps unprovoked. But that natural human fear that was overbearing, making my mind wander and my hands shake. It stopped, close to my tent, just outside my tent. I could feel its presence near me. It was totally silent. I knew it couldn't be a bear. It would be sniffing the tent right now if it was. I doubted it was a deer. They don't come out at night. Perhaps a wolf? They normally travel in packs. And even if it were a lone wolf, it wouldn't be a threat until I heard growling. But nothing. Just silence. And then, a screech. That's when I knew that this thing wasn't anything I had seen before. Nothing makes that sort of sound. It was like a cross between some sort of bird and a human. Like the shit that you hear in movies that possesses people with their heads on backwards make. That's when I let fear take over, in my bladder and in my hands. I fired the gun in its direction, and oh God, was that a mistake. It screeched again, and it scratched the tent, tearing through the fabric, leaving a massive gash in the side. That was my first look at it, if that's even what you could call it. I barely saw a silhouette through the hole in my tent, but I did see its long arms shredding the side of the tent. It was trying to get to me. I fired the gun again, but I must have missed because it didn't flinch. That's when the flight reflex took over the fight, and I only wanted to do one thing: run. I turned around and fiddled with the opening of the tent, trying to keep my eye on the beast attacking me, but also trying to secure my escape as fast as I could. I did it, and dove out of the tent, breaking into a full sprint. Behind me, I heard the thing still tearing into my tent. I thought that maybe it was mistaking its enemy or prey for the tent and not me, but that relief didn't last long. I wasn't far from the tent when I heard it prancing again. It was faster than me, gaining on me. If I tried to outrun it, I would surely be caught. Just then, in what was my crazy thinking, I stopped and dove into a thick bush near me. I remember that many animals in the forest rely on seeing movement more than anything else, so if I could stay still, then it would not see me, and this decision saved my life. It ran past me, stopping in the same place where I stopped. I didn't notice before I hid, but that spot is just under an opening in the trees. A pillar of light penetrated the darkness, and in the moonlight, I could see this thing. It was pale, and it was made even more pale by the white of the moon, and hairless, thin, like it had not ate in weeks. I want to say it looked humanoid, but comparing that thing to a human is just wrong. Its hunched back protruded out, making it look larger than any human. It stood on all fours in such a way that no human could. Its legs bent in such a fashion that it almost resembled a frog, ready to leap. It circled around, silently searching for me. I thought it was about to give up, but it threw its horrendous back upwards, and its legs straightened, and it stood on two legs, like a human, a deformed, horrific human. And then, it looked right at me. It saw me. I know it saw me. Nothing looks at you like that without seeing you. I could tell you the color of its damn eyes, and I bet you that it could tell you the color of mine. I clutched the gun close to my chest, too scared to use it, too scared to move. I closed my eyes and waiting for it to pounce, and then I opened my eyes and it was gone. I didn't move for the rest of the night. I fell asleep in that bush, clutching my gun, until finally being awoken by the sounds of birds. Birds. Thank God, it's birds. It was already daylight. The next morning, I stood up and the things around me seemed normal. The forest was speaking once again, and there were birds and deer everywhere. I stumbled back to my camp to find my things mostly as I had left them. My tent was unsalvageable, but I took my backpack, had something to eat, and then I left, just like I had planned. The entire trek back, I didn't stop looking around for that thing. I didn't let the gun leave my hands either. It wasn't until I got to the car that I relaxed, calling my friend to tell him I was heading home. I didn't tell him about what happened last night. I was still trying to process it myself. Shit, I don't even think I understand what happened until after the car ride home. And that's where the story ends. 6 years ago. And I haven't gone camping since then. I haven't even seen the thing again, nor have I heard of anyone who's seen it. My life has moved on completely, but I will never forget that thing. I will never forget how it stared at me, and then how it just left. It knew I was there, but it left. I don't know why it did that, and I don't think I'll ever get an answer. In the traditional Navajo way, skinwalkers are seen as witches, but they weren't always seen that way. My late grandmother, who was a medicine woman that practiced the blessings way, told me of the origins of the skinwalker. Being a skinwalker wasn't always seen as a bad thing. In fact, they were seen as people with amazing gifts. They could change into the form of any animal, run a certain distance very quickly, mimic people's voices, and some were known to use magic. During the colonization, skinwalkers were used to relay messages between war camps and spy on the enemy without being detected. Having the skinwalker abilities was a gift. Whenever we lost, the good of the community took a backseat and people began to focus on themselves instead of sharing what you had. People began to look after their own families, claiming property and livestock, and there were people that got the short end of the stick. Jealousy is a terrible thing. People became jealous of one another, wanted more fortunate people to lose what they had. They looked to skinwalkers who had otherworldly powers to do their bidding. Now, being a skinwalker is not a gift. You condemn yourself to a life of unhappiness and anger. In order to become a skinwalker, you must sacrifice someone that you love very much. This shows that you are indeed committed to depravity. The interesting thing is that you could have met a skinwalker and not even know it. They are people like you and me. They have chosen a path in which they will hurt other people. We burn clothing and personal items of deceased relatives, and it is very taboo to keep anything that belongs to the dead. Keeping such items can make a person sick or suffer horrible events in their life. However, skinwalkers surround themselves with death. Skinwalkers have been known to grave rob and search through people's garbage. They use bones and hair from the dead and victims' personal items to create bundles. They place these bundles near a person's home, and bad luck will fall upon the person. Now, the reason I bring this up is because the story that I'm about to tell you is about my older sister. In her younger days, my sister was very much interested in the rodeo scene. My family actually has a pretty impressive legacy when it comes to the sport. My sisters didn't compete, but had plenty of friends and family that would go and watch. My two sisters would travel around the Southwest following the rodeo circuit. The cowboy lifestyle isn't always glamorous. It can be filled with alcohol, drugs, and depression. Unfortunately, this took hold of my sister, and she got in trouble with the law. My sister was looking at jail time, and the family was very concerned about what might happen to her. My mother went to a local medicine man, and they talked about the next steps. They decided to have a ceremony for my oldest sister. A few days passed, and it was time for the ceremony. The medicine man and his wife showed up a little past dusk. They came into our house and we served them the food we had made. Everyone chatted for a little bit, and when we finished eating and cleaned up, it was time to start. Everyone sat down in the living room in a circle. The medicine man sat on the far west side of the room. My older sister sat to the left. In the middle of the circle was a large pile of sand that was smoothed out on top. My uncles got hot coals from the fire and placed them on the sand. The medicine man started praying in Navajo and sang blessing songs. This went on into the night. At the height of the ceremony, the medicine man turned to my oldest sister and told her that they would have to go outside and pray in the darkness, and he told her not to look around as he is singing. He told her to keep her eyes on him. The medicine man, my sister, and my uncle went outside. The medicine man turned around and began singing into the darkness. My sister was watching him sing, trying to keep her focus on only him. Then, she heard it. Off in the distance, she heard someone whistle. This made her feel sick to her stomach. Our elders tell us about our culture's taboos, starting at a young age. One of the biggest things that they stress is to never whistle at night. They tell us only the dead whistle at night. So when my sister heard whistling out in the darkness, fear gripped her heart. She was so scared that tears began to well up in her eyes. The whistling got louder and louder, as if whatever it was moving closer and closer. My uncle was outside during the prayer. He admits that he was scared too, but he wanted to be there for my sister. What my uncle saw was even more miraculous. He claims that as the medicine man sang, a bundle came from up above. The eagle feathers that the medicine man was holding opened up like a hand. The bundle gently floated down into the feathers, and the feathers closed around the bundle. The medicine man stopped singing, and the group went back into the house. My sister stumbled in, clearly shaken from the experience. The medicine man could see how my sister was. She then asked him what was whistling. He told her it was a skinwalker, and that he was trying to call the bundle back to it. We gathered around to see what was in the bundle. The medicine man opened up what looked to be a leather pouch. Inside of the pouch was a bone about 1 inch wide and 3 inches long. Upon closer inspection, the bone was hollow, and more items were shoved inside of the bone, held in place with twigs and dirt. He dissected the bone to find hair and pieces of a shirt that belonged to my sister, and a very tiny drawing of a woman behind bars. Whatever was calling out to this bundle had very ill intentions for my sister. Fortunately, after the ceremony, all of my sister's charges were dismissed. I asked my sister what they did with the bundle, and she said that she wasn't really sure. She says that she remembers being very scared when they were outside singing. My sister controls her emotions very well, and so I can't even begin to imagine how scared she must have felt in that moment. So if you ever hear whistling out at night, don't ever acknowledge it. I was on an assignment for the Army, making my way up from San Antonio, Texas, to Tacoma, Washington. It was a long drive, and they gave me 6 days to report to my new unit. But I didn't mind. I love road trips. There is nothing like the freedom of exploring the world by yourself. The first day of my journey, I planned to get as much driving in as possible so I could spend a few days in Utah. A sort of mini vacation, you could say. This was January, and the days were short, so maximizing the amount of daylight I had was crucial. I got up extra early that morning, carried the last of my bags out to my Corolla, signed out of my old unit, and hit the road at roughly 5 a.m. It was an amazing day. I saw the landscape transform around me as I went further west than I had ever been in my life. From the San Antonio metropolitan area to the savannas of the Edwards Plateau to the pancake flat farmland of the Great Plains region, America's headbasket. Finally, the farms opened up into prairie, and I saw the "Welcome to New Mexico, the land of enchantment" sign. Now I really was in the middle of nowhere, Continuing on US Route 380, I eventually found myself in Roswell. I could have gotten a few more hours of driving in and made it to Albuquerque, but I figured, since I was in no rush, I might as well see what Roswell had to offer. Who knows if I would get a chance to visit again. As a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious, as Mr. Baldwin would say, I took a self-guided tour of the shops and attractions. The next day, I continued to Albuquerque, then westward on Interstate 40. By the time I reached Gallup and started northbound on US Route 491, I still had 2 hours of driving left before crossing the border into Colorado, and another 45 minutes before I would get to Cortez, my planned stop for the night. However, my daylight was already running out, as sunset was at 6 p.m. I got Starbucks and refreshed myself for the final stretch. It was supposed to be easy, just a straight shot, but looking back on it now, I figured that had I decided to stop in Albuquerque instead of Roswell the night previous, I would have already been in Colorado by now, and possibly be making my way into Utah. I would have saved myself from what was waiting for me on that desolated highway. Route 491 stretched far into the Navajo Nation. On either side of me were endless expanses of prairie bookended by dark indigo mountains on the horizon. To my left, the sky glowed a faint orange-purple, the light slowly dying down like embers in a fire, until finally plunging the land into darkness. Every now and then, I would see the forlorn headlights of another car passing by, which gave me a bit of relief that I wasn't alone. I also had my road trip playlist on to keep me company, and call me ironic, but Hotel California was playing. After passing the small, lonely town of Newcomb, the next piece of civilization would be Shiprock. However, between the two was a 36-mile stretch of absolute nothingness, an abyss I had to cross, and I was not ready for what I was about to witness. After several miles, and having not seen another car on the road, I saw something strange emerge from the horizon, barely lit by the moonlight. I thought it was a road sign at first. Then, as I came closer, I realized it was a person walking on the shoulder of the road, heading in my direction. I squinted, trying my hardest to focus on the figure. In the darkness, I could tell they were wearing a poncho of some sort, with long, black hair flowing down past their chest. Who could be walking out here, all alone, at night, I thought. Whoever it was, they had no lights, no reflectors, no strobes of any kind to signal to passing vehicles that they were there. And they walked on the pavement, dangerously close to oncoming traffic. I pulled to the left a bit, giving them a wide berth. Suddenly, my stereo cut out, as if I had turned it off. The screen went completely dark, and my phone disconnected from Bluetooth. While this was unusual, it did happen from time to time, so I thought nothing of it. As I approached, I saw the person raise their right arm, as if to flag me down and hitch a ride. No, I thought. There's no way that's happening, buddy. As my headlights swept by, I realized it was a man, dressed in a button-up shirt, a poncho, jeans, and cowboy boots. His large belt buckle glinted as the lights passed him, but in that split second, I realized with shock that not only were his eyes painfully wide open, but they seemed to be tracking me. Somehow, he was able to see me through the glare of my headlights and look me dead in the eyes, not breaking contact until I passed. I was shaken for a bit, but my nerves gradually subsided. My stereo turned back on, and my music continued playing. I brushed everything off as simply my imagination. The darkness and the shadows playing tricks on my mind. Besides, the man was behind me. I figured he must have been drunk. Indian reservations, sadly, had high rates of alcoholism. I looked in my rear view mirror, and he was gone. I couldn't see him. Maybe he's too far behind me? No, that couldn't be. It must be too dark. Maybe. I drove on, trying to figure out what just happened, but at the same time, forcing myself not to think about it. Just when I thought I had moved on, I saw another shape in the distance. Getting closer, I realized it was another figure. Another person walking alone at night? There's no way. They walked along the shoulder of the road, swaying back and forth. Slowly, I could make out that this person. Then, I saw what looked like long black hair reaching down past the chest. No, there's no way. It was the man, the same man. But how? The man raised his arm again, trying to flag me down. What does this guy want? I kept up my pace, with no intention of stopping for any reason. Just like last time, my stereo turned off again. Suddenly, the man leaped out into the road, arms waving frantically. I swerved into the left lane, narrowly avoiding him. In my headlights, I noticed he had the same wide-eyed look, his gaze locked into mine. I also saw that his clothes did not look as they did on the first encounter. Once they were clean, if not well worn, but now they were soiled and tattered, rags barely hanging onto his withered frame. His hair was wild and unkempt, with clods of dried dirt stuck in the locks, but his eyes remained the same. My heart nearly burst through my chest at the sudden shock. Hyperventilating, I slowed down and glanced into the rearview mirror to make sure he was alright. Nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to see. The man was running, and he was sprinting towards me. I centered the wheel and accelerated, hoping to get as much distance from him as possible. But as I continued to speed up, so did he. Faster and faster I drove, but every time I looked in the mirror, I would still see him right behind me, perfectly keeping pace, his body tinted red by my taillights. I could feel my head throbbing and my hands getting slick with sweat on the steering wheel. I was sick to my stomach. There's no way. I looked forward, hoping to see a faint glimmer of light from the town ahead, but I was still too far away. I looked back at the rear view mirror, and the man was gone. I should have been relieved, but I knew better. Where did he go? I looked around, hoping to regain a visual on him. I couldn't see anything. Taking a deep breath, I refocused on the road, but kept my guard up. Just keep driving, I told myself. Only a few more miles to go. Out of the corner of my right eye, I saw something. Another shape. It wasn't the man. At least, I didn't think so. I glanced over, bracing myself for whatever was going to meet my sight. It looked like an animal, some kind of animal, though I couldn't make out exactly what it was. Under the moonlight, I could see it running alongside my car. Its limbs reaching out in long strides, its back undulating like a dog. Closer and closer it came. The closer it was, the more of it I could see, little by little. Then I noticed its limbs were far too long for its body. Its body was too short. It had no tail. The head was round, and from it came a trail of long, black hair. I slammed my foot on the gas, pushing my car's engine harder than it had ever been pushed before. By now, I was clocking well over 110. But this creature, it was keeping up. It wasn't phased. It simply ran faster and faster to match my speed. Just what was this thing? How could anyone or anything run this fast? This entity seemed to have endless stamina. Just how long could it keep this up? Just how much faster could it go? Soon, I knew my car would hit its top speed. And then what? How long could it maintain that before breaking down? It wouldn't be long until my engine overheats. But regardless, I would eventually run out of gas. And when I do, what would happen if that thing got me? At 120 miles per hour, my car had reached its limit. This was the fastest I could go, but the creature continued its pursuit. My temperature gauge was approaching the red, and so was my tachometer. I couldn't keep this up any longer. Suddenly, like the beacon of a lighthouse on a tumultuous sea, the first light of shiprock came into view. It was close, so close. If I could just go a little longer, I could make it into town, to safety. I pressed on. I fixed my eyes on the lights, growing brighter on the horizon. They bloomed outwards, glimmering in the night air. Though it was a small town, it was a sight for sore eyes in my situation. Looking in my periphery, I saw the undulation of the creature's spine as it kept pace with my car. But now it was slipping away, steering far and further from the road. It suddenly hit me just how hard my heart was beating. Beads of sweat dripped down my face. I looked over. The creature was gone. But this time, the feeling of dread had also gone with it. My stereo once again turned back on, and as my music resumed, I took a breath of deep sigh of relief. I let off the accelerator. This man, the creature, whatever it was finally gone for good. Having white-knuckled the steering wheel the whole time without realizing it, my hands were extremely sore, but I was glad to have made it through. A week later, I told another soldier in my unit about what I experienced. Being originally from Albuquerque, she was familiar with the Native American legends of the Southwest. The conversation steered towards a certain creature that she would not dare speak the name of. She also told me that the highway I took was well known for all sorts of paranormal phenomena. Google what Route 491 used to be called, and everything will make sense. Be careful out there.